Hello and welcome back to another week of Open Mic Night. So glad you guys made it back. iPhones are bending, there's a Shellshock vulnerability that everyone is freaking out about, and Windows 10 is out. So much to talk about this week, so stick around. I think it'll be a really fun show. All right, so like I said, welcome back to another week of Open Mic Night. Welcome to any new listeners out there. My name is Mike Weger. I'm your host. This is a product of WegerTech.com. I do this show live every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. So if you want to, come on out, WegerTech.com/live, join the chat room, and you can listen, chat, you can even call in, which is a lot of fun. Tonight, though, I actually just tried to do this show about 12 minutes ago, and the storm that's going on right now, so if you guys hear a huge storm, there's a massive storm rolling through Omaha. It actually knocked out my internet. And so this is not a live show. It was for the first 15 minutes, but I had to restart and start fresh. So first of all, sorry to any of you guys who were watching live. I know there are a few of you there. Sorry that I had to stop that. But just as good, I'll record it and publish it, and you guys still get to hear it. But sadly, we don't get any call-ins or anyone in the chat when we're not doing it live, which is the sad part. But like I said, welcome back to Open Mic Night. So much stuff to talk to you guys about this week, so we might as well just get on started. First of all, man, what a week for Apple. Apple has been in the news, I think, a little bit more than they wanted in the past week. And if I worked for Apple PR or anything like that, or their support team, it would not have been a fun week to work. So basically, there are two big stories with Apple this week. And you guys know that in the past 2 weeks, I've talked to you guys about some of the problems with the live stream when they announced the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, and also with the pre-ordering process. We talked about those problems a while back. But Apple is in the news again with two more stories that just weren't that great for Apple. And so let's start talking about number one. Hashtag Bendgate, hashtag Benghazi, hashtag anything bending an iPhone in it. People were becoming really creative with their hashtags. Basically, there is this thing going around with everyone saying that their iPhone 6 Plus is bending. And that up towards the power buttons, it's starting to get a slight bend in it. Now, okay, so I'm going to tell you guys how this whole thing started, and then you guys can be the judge whether you guys want to really kind of take this to heart and think of it as hard fact. So last weekend, there were a few Twitter individuals who were tweeting out that their iPhone 6 Plus, after they had been wearing it in their front pocket or in their jeans, was starting to get a slight bend. And so this was just a few people. I'm not talking about hundreds. I'm not talking about thousands. I'm talking about probably like 10 people were tweeting about this. But obviously it got picked up because who doesn't love a fresh Apple story after a new release of their new product? It's happened in the past, and it happened again. So a few people were tweeting about this, and then, of course, a lot bigger people on YouTube started to make videos testing if their iPhone 6 would bend. Now, when they're testing if their iPhone 6 would bend, they were not walking around putting it in their pocket and using it under normal stress situations. What they were doing was they were taking it in their hand and bending it as hard as they could, right in the middle, pushing their thumbs right in the middle and trying to bend their phone. And when I saw that, I'm like, well, of course it's going to bend. I could have told you that. I could have told you that it was going to bend when you put that much pressure. The guy from Unbox Therapy on YouTube, if you guys haven't heard of him, he's extremely popular on YouTube, one of the biggest tech guys on YouTube. He made a video, and the last time I checked, it was up to 41 million views. Now, in the video, I mean, his thumbs are literally turning purple from bending the phone so hard. But yes, it did bend. Surprise, surprise. And so we started to see from all these videos and things like that the iPhone 6 would bend, 6 Plus, because it's a little bit bigger, would bend if you really put a ton of pressure into it. Now, that was why I started to kind of not put too much stock into this story right from the beginning. Because, you're taking your phone and you're putting it in a situation that you wouldn't normally have your phone. And I hope none of you are taking your phone on a normal basis and trying to bend it. That's just not something that you would normally do. And so actually, the reason the story got so much traction is because it got picked up by the big news channels. ABC, NBC, all those big networks, they were picking it up. They even were calling the guy from Unbox Therapy and doing interviews with him because, his YouTube video was blowing up, and they want to know his opinion on the bending iPhone. So what does this mean for you guys? If you guys order an iPhone 6 Plus, I wouldn't worry about it, honestly, because I know a lot of you are not going to be putting your phone into situations that are going to cause it to bend. Now, the first few tweets were interesting, and if they were more widespread, I might believe it. If we had thousands of people saying that their phone was bending in their pockets when they were just walking around, I would put more merit into the story. But when there's more than 10 million of these, devices already shipped on launch day, and there's only just a handful of people that I can count on like one or two hands that had the problem, I don't think it's going to be too big of an issue. Now, the thing about the iPhone 6 Plus is that it is extremely large. So the iPhone 6 Plus is way longer than any other phone that Apple has made. And obviously, the longer the object, the easier it is to bend. If you think about a pencil, if you take a brand new pencil and it's really long and you try and bend it, it's pretty, pretty easy to break. But as the pencil gets shorter and shorter, it gets harder to break. And so that was one comparison I saw in another YouTube video someone make, and it's so true because, as these devices get bigger and bigger, and because they're so thin, they are going to be easier to bend. Now, the reason that the iPhone 6 Plus is kind of getting a bad rap for this bending is because a lot of other YouTube people out there, a lot of other, people in the industry actually went through and they did a stress test, putting pressure on the straight middle of the phone and trying to bend it. Now, they did this to the iPhone 6 Plus, but they also did it to a lot of other phones. The Galaxy Note, the Samsung Galaxy S5, the S4, all those phones they did the test on. Now, the one downside to the 6 Plus was that all of the phones bent. That's one thing you guys got to know. Of course, if you put pressure right in the middle of a phone, it's going to bend. The iPhone 6 Plus did what the one problem was that it didn't, after they took the pressure off, it didn't bend back. A lot of these other phones that aren't made out of aluminum, they kind of went back to their shape a little better than the iPhone 6 Plus did. The iPhone 6 Plus tended to keep the bend in it. And so we will see how Apple responds to this. The funny thing is that everyone loves to have a good Apple story. I told you guys about that in the past. And, with AntennaGate, back when Apple released the iPhone 4, they had the antenna around the outside of the phone. And what was happening was as people were holding the phone, it was actually your cell signal would drop dramatically. And you might even actually drop a call from wrapping your hand around that antenna on the outside. And so Apple responded. They gave everyone a free iPhone bumper, which is a little case so it would seal the antenna so your hand wouldn't cause you to drop the call. And so we'll see what Apple does with the bending iPhone 6. And so I don't think they will do anything. No, this might be as easy as Apple giving everyone a free case again. They might give everyone their leather case that they have. They might make their own harder, more protective case and give it away. But I honestly don't think they need to. When you see people's thumbs turning purple trying to break a phone, that's just not normal. That no one's going to be doing that. And so maybe possibly if we see more people having trouble with maybe keeping your phone in your pocket, that is one thing that I could see happening. My most likely scenario is, I don't wear tight jeans by any means, but when you have your phone in your pocket and you sit down, there is pressure on that phone. So I can only imagine maybe for women, if, those jeans tend to be tighter, you might have an issue. I know, and especially on women's jeans, I know the pockets are a lot smaller. And so it's a lot more pressure on the phone and half of it might be sticking out. And who knows all the different scenarios. So I'm sure I'm sure they tested it in the first place, but I'm sure they're going back, testing again. And I'm sure we'll hear a response from them if they think it's something they need to address. So that was #BendGate. And, kind of like AntennaGate, they just put bend in front of it. Really creative people. But that was the whole thing on Twitter and on ABC, NBC. I'm sure you guys heard about that story. So that was number one with Apple this week. And so Apple has just had a rough month. I feel kind of bad for their PR people because they had a lot of stuff going down. But the second story this week was that you guys may have noticed, you may have not, but they released an update 8.0.1. So they released this earlier this week. And what happened was that when the update went out, they started to get reports right away that the update was causing people to not have any cell signal. As soon as they updated to 8.0.1, their cell phone was not able to make calls, send texts. It actually showed no service up by where, it would usually say Verizon or Sprint or AT&T, T-Mobile, that sort of thing. They were getting zero service. Apple pulled down the update right away. They pulled it down. I think it was only up for about an hour and a half, 40 minutes, something like that. It was a very short period of time. but those people had already updated and they were kind of stuck now, because if you guys know how it works, it's actually really hard to go back in time with the updates. They usually make it very hard to refer back to an older version of iOS. You kind of have to know what you're doing. It's not cut and dry. But Apple did publish instructions on how to get back to 8.0 just regular, and so hopefully those people were able to get back there. But actually, within I think about 24 hours, they had 8.0.2 out, so if you guys look at your updates right now, 8.0.2 is out. That is the current version, and that fixed the whole issue. And so if you were on still 8.0.1 and you couldn't figure out how to get back, at least within 24 hours, you were able to update. But this, for me, was a big issue. I think, I don't think I was really surprised that the bending iPhone 6 was getting more storage, more coverage than the 8.0.1 release. And that's because, the bending iPhone, like I said, was something people were doing. But when Apple, the maker of a cell phone, publishes an update to phones that makes the phone not a phone. I mean, the number one thing you should be able to do with your phone is make a call and send a text. I mean, just the basic phone functionality that's been around forever, that should be fundamental. And I'm just baffled by the fact that some code could have gotten into the update. Something could have caused the phone to not be a phone. And so for me, you guys know I'm the biggest Apple fanboy. I am the first to back them, to support them and what they're doing, and usually to give them the benefit of the doubt. But on this one, I just thought that this is something that is completely on Apple. They didn't have to push out the 8.0.1 update. There was nothing pressing that people were, no one needed this update for them. Yes, they wanted HealthKit to work, but there was nothing pressing that should have caused them to release the update so early that they didn't check the basic functionality of these things. And so I would love to know. I'm sure we'll start to hear in the next week or so. Maybe Apple's really tight-lipped, but maybe we'll start to hear some stories on how exactly that little blip happened. But man, between the 8.0.1 update and the bending iPhone 6 and all the issues with streaming the live event when they announced the phone, and all the issues with the pre-orders for the iPhone 6, Apple has had a rough month. And it only leads me to wonder kind of where Apple's going, because you would think that, Apple has been such a tightly run company for so long. And I hate to bring up the Steve Jobs analogy because, it's been Tim Cook's Apple for a while, and Apple has done a lot of amazing things under Tim Cook. But I have to say that I don't think a lot of this would have happened under Steve Jobs. It's just one of those things I don't think would have happened. But you never know. I'm not blaming this on Tim Cook. I'm not saying it's something like that. But man, there's been a lot of stuff this month. And the thing that surprises me is that after the live streaming debacle, and they knew that happened, you'd think they would have just had everyone, working nonstop. No one gets to go home until we have our release and our shipping of the iPhone and everything just set. And but they didn't. They've had issue after issue after issue this month. And so for me, being an Apple fanboy, it's hard to watch. It's almost like watching your kid fall and stumble because, you love them so much and you don't want to see them get hurt. And so for me, watching Apple just having this blunder after blunder and taking the hit from the media, because the media is just being relentless on Apple right now. Every article you read, you can't even find anything good to say about Apple right now. Even from the Apple fanboys, we're all admitting, man, this was rough, and this is something that probably shouldn't have happened and that Apple should have been able to control. So that 8.1.0.1 update was really probably the worst thing I could have seen happening for Apple this week. But just to clarify, that update and apparently the only phones affected were the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. So if you had the 5S, the 5, the 4S, and you updated to 8.0.1, you probably didn't even notice anything. You probably didn't notice any different. Apparently the only phones affected were the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. But like I said, it's all corrected. They did do a really good job. I will give them credit for, taking down the update within an hour and getting an update out there as soon as they could to fix the issue. So that was the Apple news for the last week. And man, it was rough. It was really rough to watch. But moving on from Apple, there was more scares in the technology world this week. Back a while ago, you guys, I told you guys about, and I talked about the Heartbleed vulnerability. And so we talked about that with the whole SSL thing and how the entire internet was freaking out that everyone was going to, change all your passwords and do everything like that, which was true. It was an honest vulnerability that needed to be corrected and the public needed to know about. Well, this week we had another one come up, and it was the Shellshock vulnerability. That's kind of a mouthful to say. But basically what the Shellshock vulnerability is it's kind of hard to explain. So I'm going to try and make it as simple as I can. But for any Unix-based systems, that's Linux, that's Mac, anything that uses that, there is in the terminal, let's just talk about Mac to make it easy because a lot of you have Macs. There's an app on your Mac called the terminal, and this is where you can enter commands to your computer, the command line. Basically, when that opens up, you're opening up a little mini application called Bash. And so Bash, what it does is it takes your command lines and kind of translates them to the computer. It makes it so that we can have kind of an easy access, and it makes our command lines a lot easier. And so Bash has been around for, I think, like 3 decades now. It's been around for a while, and it's been in any system that is Unix-based. And so that's all Macs. Now, what they found was that when you are doing the command line, when you're in Bash, when you're doing these, there's these things called environmental variables, things that can be set. And when anything in Bash, anything in this command line, you can tell your computer to pretty much do whatever you want in that command line. Actually, there's a lot of things that when you can't do it from the interface, if I can't point and click and change a setting, usually there's a way to do it from the command line. It's really at the base of the computer. You can really get down and control things on the computer with this command line. You can do a lot of things. And so with these environmental variables, these are things that are in the computer that can be set through the command line. And basically in a roundabout way, what they found out was that you can store commands in these variables. And the problem is that a lot of times for developers and anyone that has a computer that is running kind of a web server, anything that can be controlled from the web. So for most of you, this isn't going to be a big issue. But what they said was that any computer that's kind of that you can control for the internet, is interacting with the internet, a lot of times when these things are programmed, sometimes they have the ability for users on the outside to plug in anything that will be stored in those environmental variables. Well, the problem is what they found out is that hackers can plug in a command. So let's say, they're asking for enter your last name, and instead they enter a command line and that's stored in an environmental variable. Then that command can be run from your computer and you don't even know it. It can set up an account for the hacker, set the password, and then they have full access to your computer. And so it was kind of it sounds very scary, but for the average user, I would say that they're releasing updates to Bash quickly. By now, everything should be updated. The one worry was that when you turn on your computer and you try and connect to a Wi-Fi, anytime you connect to a Wi-Fi network, you obtain an IP address. That router sends your computer your IP address. This is what I talked about 2 weeks ago with home networking, how that's almost your address. That is how the network knows who your computer is. Now, that process of getting the IP address uses Bash. It actually uses the application that was hacked, and so they were worried for a while before all this started getting patched was that if you were accessing open Wi-Fi networks, that you could be vulnerable. So for the average consumer, the actual biggest threat was taking your computer to a public Wi-Fi area, not your home or anything like that, but to a public area, the coffee shop, the library, anything like that, obtaining the IP address and having someone on that network being malicious and trying to get onto your computer. So by now, you guys should have nothing to worry about. Just know, I always love to educate you guys so that when you hear Shellshock vulnerability, if anyone talks about it, when you hear your IT guy talking about it or something like that, you at least know and you have the basic facts of what happened. So that is the vulnerability. But like I said, as of now, it is patched. Apple actually said that although the terminal in your Mac uses Bash by default, that we are no longer vulnerable, even though there was no update release. So I was kind of confused about that when I was reading that story on how exactly Macs were not vulnerable, because there is a test command that you can run to see if your Mac is vulnerable, and I did it, and mine actually still says I'm vulnerable. So I'm not sure that I'm kind of getting conflicting stories from what Apple said and what my computer tells me. It actually tells me that I am vulnerable. And so that's about it for Shellshock. We don't need to go into too many of the big details. Because unless you're an IT, unless you're a systems admin or anything like that, it's really nothing that you guys personally need to be worried about. But it's always good to know what's going on in the tech sphere. So that was Shellshock, and everyone was freaking out about it. It was a widespread worry. People were actually rating it on a scale of 1 to 10. They kind of rate these hacks on a scale of 1 to 10 on how easy they are to do, how widespread the hack could be, and how bad of an outcome could happen if you were hacked. And this was actually rated a 10 out of 10. So at the onset, people were really, really worried. But the funny thing is, it was kind of found out that this vulnerability has been around for 20 years. For 2 decades, this vulnerability has been around. So who knows how many computers, how many things have been compromised in those last 20 years, but we are just now finding out about it. But things are being patched. And so if you are a systems admin, or maybe for some reason you have a server running Unix in your house or something like that, do run your updates and make sure you're running the most up-to-date software that hopefully that bash will get updated. So moving on. You guys know I love to talk about Apple, and I usually talk about them all the time, but I kind of wanted to talk about tonight because today, actually this morning, before my show, Windows 10 was announced. And so Microsoft releases Windows 10. Now, a lot of you guys run Windows on your computer, and you're running Windows 8. And you're like, Windows 10? Where did Windows 9 go? It was kind of funny. A lot of people were predicting the name would be Windows 9. It only makes sense because of Windows 8. But actually, Microsoft jumped to Windows 10. And they said it's because this is the last major overhaul for the operating system. And from there on out, we're going to kind of start doing incremental updates, not these kind of yearly or bi-yearly kind of big updates. And so people with Windows 8, Microsoft released that back in 2012. So they've had 2 years to work on it because the reaction to Windows 8 was not very good. They had the whole Metro interface that people didn't like. So Microsoft is really kind of getting rid of the Metro interface, but they're not really getting rid of all the tiles that you guys are used to with the Metro interface. And so a lot of things, they brought back the start menu, and in the start menu, you'll have some of those interactive live tiles. And this Windows 10 is going to run on a variety of devices, from phones to tablets to desktops and laptops. And so you're going to have Windows 10 on just about everything. But yeah, so they had this final kind of big upgrade, and they were really excited about it. Now, they said that October 1st, I believe, is when beta testers might be able to test it, but the final product of Windows 10 will not be ready until kind of spring of 2015. So sometime next spring, we will see the full release of Windows 10. And so, like I said, I want to apologize to you guys tonight because I know it's a short show. When I don't have anyone in the chat room and there's no one to call in, man, I didn't realize that how much I love having you guys' questions in the show and how much I like having you guys call in. But like I said, I'm sorry for my internet going out tonight. The big storm rolling through. I'm sure you guys could hear it at some points when the thunder was clapping. But it knocked out my internet, so I was not able to do this show live. One last thing I was going to tell you guys was that my giveaway that I talked about last week, or actually like 3 weeks ago, I started my giveaway. It's over at WeagerTech.com/giveaway. I'm giving you guys another week, so I'm extending that to next week. We don't have enough entries yet to give away the iPhone. So if you guys did enter, then be sure to spread the word and try and get as many of your friends in. We have 15 signed up, and we need 100. So I know that's a lot, but we have 1 week left, and I really, really want to give away the Apple iWatch, which is in the form of a $350 Apple gift card. I got to clarify that. But I want to give you guys a $350 Apple gift card. But in order to do that, we need 100 entries into the giveaway. So make your final push and get the word out there. Again, I'll put up the website. It's WeagerTech.com/giveaway. Man, what a fun show, though. There was so much packed into that show, and I feel like I just kind of sped through it. That's what happens when I don't have the chat room to kind of draw my attention to or anything like that. But as far as the giveaway, that was what I want to talk to you guys about. If you guys do want to support my sponsors, I really love them. Lynda.com, I want to thank them. Lynda.com/WeagerTech, and then audibletrial.com/WeagerTech. I want to thank them for their sponsorships. I also want to thank WLMN Radio. Actually, tonight we had Roger Blake was scheduled to come on. He is the owner of WLMN Radio, who you guys know streams me during the week. And so I am on the radio station there in Grafton, West Virginia, and also on their internet stream. So if you guys have not checked them out, and that is not the website, if you guys are watching the video, head on over to WLMNradio.com and give them a check out. They are starting to stream a lot of really good tech talent. So if you guys like this sort of show where we talk about tech and a lot of good interviews and stuff like that, head on over there and look at their shows that they have, because they're bringing in a lot of really good tech talent. And Roger was supposed to be on tonight. He actually had to move to 2 weeks from today. He had a conflict tonight. And so 2 weeks from now, we will have Roger Blake from WLMN Radio. Him and I are going to have some really cool conversations. We're going to start talking about copyright. Obviously, he runs a radio station, and so copyright of music is a big deal. And me being in law school, it's kind of right up my alley. So I'm excited to talk about copyright with Roger, and we're going to talk about a lot of really other fun stuff. But actually, that's 2 weeks from today. But next week, I have the guys from Red Button Jam Fest they're going to be guests on the show. And they are on YouTube, and they are starting a podcast, and they are doing a bunch of really cool stuff, and they are in the gaming sphere. So as you guys know, there is a huge push, and there's a huge movement of kids loving watching people play video games. And so a lot of people are playing video games and streaming it live on the internet, or recording them playing games like on the Xbox or the computer and putting them on YouTube. And it is the number one revenue source. Like when we're talking about making money on ads on YouTube, these kids, these gaming videos make the most money out of any videos. And so we have kids that are making thousands of dollars recording themselves playing Minecraft and stuff like that. So that's what they're into next week. And so we're going to get into the whole kind of economy of streaming your video game play. And we're going to talk all about that sort of stuff. Really fun, really cool guys. I just talked to them this weekend. We were talking over what we want to talk about, and they're just some really fun guys. So next week, be sure to tune in live, because we will take live call-ins and we'll have the chat room. And I really want to hear what you guys have to say about what we're talking about next week and the following week with Roger Blake. So the next 2 weeks, we got 2 weeks of interviews. So be ready. It'll be a lot of fun. I love bringing people on to the show. So like I said, this show is every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Central Time, over on WeagerTech.com/live. Come out and join us. I love all you guys. But until next time, tech on.